I'm Dean of the School of Architecture. I'm Dean of the School of Architecture at the Boston Architectural College. Welcome. We know that power in society is manifest spatially in access to good jobs, robust schools, efficient public transportation, healthy food, safe drinking water, and good air quality. We also know that a lack of power can be expressed in the absence of these things. Safe neighborhoods made up of healthy buildings engender a sense of well-being while their absence diminishes it. When we speak of just space, we mean an inclusive environment that makes all community members feel welcome and confers a sense of balance, belonging, and well-being. The BAC's lecture series, exhibits, and our curricular aim to critique current situations, suggest ways to correct conditions of inequity, and bring awareness and visibility to the design of just communities. This is our 5th event in our lecture series entitled Just Communities. This lecture is supported by the John Worthington Ames Scholarship, which was established in 1955 by Mrs. John Worthington Ames in memory of her husband. Ames was a distinguished Boston architect and dedicated supporter of the BAC. The John Worthington Ames Scholarship is to be used to further personal development through an educational experience related to architecture and design in accordance with a stated Ames Committee definition. The educational experience is one that would develop mental, artistic, or cultural capacities. Andrew Mitchell was the recipient of the most recent Ames Scholarship, and he pursued his proposal, as he does everything, fully with generosity and curiosity. I can think of no other recent alum who embodies this notion of just communities better for his quest for inclusion and lifting others up. Before Andrew became a student at the BAC, he toured as a musician across the United States, Australia, Canada, South Korea, and South Africa with Arts Empowering Life. A career shift to architecture was prompted by helping build the Good Shepherd Academy Secondary School in Cameroon. While with Architectural Design Incorporated and AD Build on Cape Cod, Andrew worked on residential projects and institutional buildings focused on the arts. He studied in Italy and Colombia and earned his Bachelor of Architecture degree with us. As an Ames Scholar, Andrew researched the Aga Khan Award for architecture winners across the Islamic world. He is a co-founder of Detour Habitats, a nonprofit dedicated to bridging the design divide and encouraging design access in areas with prevalent self-construction. Andrew currently works as an architect with Bragman Hendry, an archetype, focusing on community centers and recreational facilities. Please give a warm welcome to BAC alum.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you to many people who are out on the Zoom and helped me along the way. I could have 4 or 5 slides of thank yous. And especially thank you to Bernie Goba, who was a big supporter of this scholarship and passed away during the pandemic while the trip was happening. And I hope to make him proud. The Aga Khan. This is him on the tee when he was 20 years old. And when he was 20 years old, he was at Harvard, and overnight he became the spiritual leader for the Ismaili, which is Islamic. And overnight he was responsible for 20 million followers. And one of the things he did is he established a humanitarian network. And you can kind of get the flavor of what he's about when he, this is his quote here. I think one of the lessons we've learned in this exercise is to listen. Quite simply, to listen and listen and listen. One of his projects is the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, which is a triennial award given to architects, contractors, and clients that serve Islamic communities. If you look at this list, it's sort of the who's who of architecture, really. It's wildly successful. He established it because he noticed that architecture was focused on Western architects and architecture, and there was a lack of celebration, looking towards the Islamic world. So now in 2023, I think it's fair to say it's quite successful. And so the Boston Architecture College agreed to send me to study it. What I was looking for, if you look at where these projects are, they're really all over the place. They're different cultures, you name it. And what I was hoping to find was something that sort of connected between all the different projects that I could take home here to Boston or wherever and use that same approach. So I don't know how successful I was, but I did find three things that I'd love you to keep in mind. One, generosity. Every place I went, the architects went out of their way. Even if they're running a firm of 50 people, they'll take the afternoon to tell me their whole story, and who am I? I'm just a researcher from somewhere, So that sort of generosity is difficult to describe, but you know it when you feel it, and I absolutely felt it. The other thing is critique, which I'll get to in the middle of this, and then the last is usefulness, which we'll close up with. One thing that happened, I went to see the 2019 cycle, the pandemic hit, so I couldn't go anywhere. By the time I was on the road, the 2022 cycle came out. So we'll get to see a little bit of that too. This is where I went. The red dots are my pictures. We're not going to get to all of them tonight, but we will get to the labels there. Those are the Aga Khan projects. We'll start with Bahrain, the Purling Path. So Bahrain has a culture, a history that is centered around the purling industry. In the early 30s, it was the height, everybody on the island was involved in purling. They would go out for 3 months at a time on a boat, dive for pearls, and then Japan found cultured pearls and the economy collapsed. Additionally, oil was discovered. So the whole island shifted from this old city purling to really slick city kind of oil capital across the way. So this is where all the action is. Meanwhile, the old city was left to neglect, and a lot of foreign workers came in, so it wasn't, they weren't caring for the place. And Sheikh Amai had a project where she said, this is our heritage. We need to, revitalize the old city. And one of the things they did was they put in this path through the city, and the genius of it is in this lamp pole. It leads through the old city, and it's a serial project where there are several points along the way of modern architecture, and their modern architecture is mixed with the historical restoration. And you can see here all along this path, they're redoing the facades. Any facade that had an air conditioner that was facing the facade, they put a rooftop unit on. And the historical restoration is fantastic. You can see the hands of the builders in some of the walls and the reinforcement that they used. Here's an example of continuing work. If you see the maker's mark on this hinge, they're still trying to find whose maker's mark that is. So if anybody wants a challenge, this is the end result of their work. It's these beautiful heritage spaces. Another part of this project is these plazas, which are really fantastic. And incidentally, during the pandemic, the call to prayer, they were able to come and pray in these parks and still stay 6 feet apart. You know, the sermons given out through the towers. And but in order to get these parks, I mean, this is really a car-dominated culture. It's hot. You don't go anywhere without a car. So to put the parks, they had to get rid of the cars. So they've have a half dozen or so of these parking garages. These are by Christian Carras, and some of them are actually complete. When I was there, we're still working on them. But that was a lot of form work and really fun parking garages. I imagine you'll see more of those in the news. Yeah. But the old city is surrounded by this reclamation project, and you can see the highway kind of cuts them off from the water. They're traditionally a seafaring people, and that bridge that you were seeing is part of the Purling Path, and it connects to this incredible space. It's really you know, some of these alleys. I was there on my own, and you wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, that's an alley I can walk down. But then you see these lights, and you say, okay, you know, this is the path, and I'm gonna follow it. And it leads through into the heart of the city. They have this cultural center. Imagine some wonderful cult music. And that cultural center is not technically part of the Purling Path, but it really is all one thing. They all work together and lead to one another and create an experience that is fantastic. And it serves both the people who are living there, and it also is an attempt to bring some tourism into and it's absolutely worth going and seeing some of this fantastic stuff. And the modern against the historical is really really special. You know, you're on the one hand you're seeing things like this, and on the other you're walking past some new contemporary works. So that's a quick nutshell on the Purling Path in Bahrain. We're gonna head south now to Sharjah, where we're looking at the Wasi Wetland Center, and they have aviaries there. I happen to be a bird lover, so I apologize if too many of my pictures are birds. There's a flight path that goes right through Sharjah, and water from the Omani Mountains goes under the desert and pops up and mixes with water from the Persian Gulf, creating a lagoon, which is surrounded by this landscape. Now, the lagoon used to be a trash pit. It's pretty remarkable how much it's changed. They put up a fence to keep people from throwing trash, and it ended up becoming a sanctuary for all kinds of wildlife. And you can see the thickness of it. It's really, you know, it's so thick that you actually are separated from the city beyond. You know, you can see Sharjah there, and if you look, this is flying out of the airport. You can see circled there. That's the wetland, and it's surrounded by this incredible development. You know, this massive amount of development. And on the left is your typical experience, and on the right is the wetland. Within the wetland, this is done by ex-architects. They have these little bird hides. There are maybe half dozen of them or so, and they're all sort of unique and different, but they give you this opportunity to kind of experience the wildlife, and some of the birds are a little skittish, so you know you can see them. They also have, you know, this sand gazelle, which is endangered, and I love this picture because you can kind of see the architecture there, and that's really all you can see. It's an architecture that disappears, which is talking with Mr. Farid, who was the architect. He explained that they wanted something, you know, Dubai, that said, hey, you know, here we are. And he was able to convince them, you know, let's make this more about the nature. So the building goes down into the ground, it has a core and a support, and it's very simple, you know, row of columns supporting a roof, and aviaries on each side, and you can get right up to these birds. You know, the glass is tilted so that when the birds look, they see the ground in the reflection, and they brought in all kinds of ornithologists, and you know, in the end, you're able to see some pretty fantastic wildlife there. They have a really strong educational component, which is really fun. You know, you bring your kids here. This is like the fun time, and fall in love with birds. Well, let's go. So this is Mr. Farid, and one thing that he explained to me is that he grew up 100 or 200 meters from this project. So it was really important to him. And as we go along through these projects, I think this is something that makes good architecture, is when a project is really important to you, you know? So I think you'll see that again in some of these next projects. So along the way, I'm just gonna kind of pop around. I had a chance to see some other architectures, and this is the Louvre in Abu Dhabi. Fantastic, one of my favorite buildings. The Dubai Expo was happening, and I found the Modular Man in the reflection off the Saudi. And I had a layover in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. Dawit Benti gave a talk here, and Karen generously connected me with him, and he showed me around Addis Ababa, and this is Belay and his fantastic tunnel. This is Tesfaye Barakat, and you can see the model on the left and the building on the right. And the thing that's amazing about this is, you know, this is the context that he's building in on the left, and this is the world he's building on the right. You know, the contrast when you walk into his space is unbelievable. This is Elias Simon. Every detail in this building is thought through from top to bottom. It's a little bit somewhere between John Watts and Gaudi. And now we're to Senegal. Senegal, this is the Center for International Commerce, and in the next couple of years, this is expected to be rehabilitized by Aziza Kayoni, and it's a fantastic space. On the coast of Dakar, you've got a lot of color, and you've got a lot of really interesting things going on in Dakar. And so Senegal has something like 20 million people, and they have one architecture school. So, you know, think about that, like how many architects are there serving these people if there's just, you know, one school. So Jean-Charles Tal was the founder of the school, and he was generous enough to invite me in to see some of his studio exchanges. And this is an exchange with ENSA, Paris. And it was really interesting to talk with him, because where I was headed was here out in Bambay, which is sort of in the interior. And this project really draws on the traditional Senegalese architecture. I'm not sure that this is going to work without the audio.
Before the building, it was very difficult because we
sing?
didn't have enough space or enough building doing classes.
That's all right. This is Bamba. He's a great guy.
At the normal
And
time, 40 degrees.
you know, he really was,
Celsius
because
in
there weren't
Bamba.
very many English
But
speakers out there.
When
And
they put the building here, now we can have
he showed me around the school
25
and shared with me a
degrees.
bit. But the traditional architecture is, you know, it looks like that, but then the Alioune Diop University, where this Aga Khan project is brand new, right? And talking with Mr. Javier, he explained to me that they designed this school like a machine. So there's no air conditioning, right? And it works. It's comfortable inside. There's a double screen facade. So this is IDOM on the left, their headquarters in Spain. They're just down the street from Bilbao and Gary. And these guys are working in this context. So it's really interesting to see how they manage to sort of assimilate the culture and work in that space. One thing that's kind of fun, Mr. Javier explained to me that when they were first designing, they were trying to make it all dynamic. They had all these little modules and they were, you know, moving everything around. And then they made it super simple. It's just this long straight line, and it's beautiful, you know. It wouldn't have the same effect if things were all tweaked around and whatnot. If you have ever studied the problem of the corner, this is a good building to check out. But this is the context, you know, this is the university view from the building. And it's fantastic. You know, the context outside, those are baobab trees. This is your transportation. This is your typical, and this is Tuba, which is a very interesting place, even further in the interior. So I went from Senegal, and I had a little detour to see my friend Judeman, who's a BAC alum. He was getting married. And along the way, he showed me Mahabalipuram, and I also got to see Qatar with Jean Nouvel and the Qatar National Museum and the National Library by OMA. And this was all on my way to Palestine. So this is Ramallah, and it's going to see the Palestinian Museum. The Palestinian Museum is really interesting in that it's one of the first buildings in that area that doesn't have columns. So all the buildings that you see around all have columns inside. So this is, you know, the skin is the structure, and it's very heavy on the sustainability aspects, and quite an interesting experience inside. Outside is a garden. Oops, I'm getting ahead of myself. Outside is a garden, which is terraced, and you can see here the different themes that they have in the garden, which you may be like, okay, it's a garden, but what you begin to realize when you're there is that it's full of the herbs that the Palestinians use to cook. And the Palestinian identity is very one-on-one with their food. So you see the Palestinians come into the garden and they see the spices that are in their food and how it grows. And it's incredible just to see the joy on their face as they connect, the herbs with the plants. This is Auntie Intisar, who I stayed with and cooked fantastic Palestinian food for me. And this is her garden on the left. And I lived with her for about a month and visited the museum. There's artwork in the gardens as well. And it was cold, it snowed while I was there, which is unusual. As I mentioned, there's sustainability aspects. Henning Peng is the architect out of Ireland who did this project. And they said to me, we didn't want to build a building that would be a burden. So it's, net zero, all the water comes from the site, and it's won dozens of sustainability awards. And it has really complex systems that are working. And it's really beautiful. The garden is a tour de force. It's done by a Jordanian landscape architect. And this is another project by Palestinian architects at AAU Anastas. They were shortlisted for the 2022 cycle. They're doing really interesting things with stone. If you look at that ceiling, it's all made out of stone with interlocking parts. So it's just stone. And part of their effort is to sort of reclaim stone from this lipstick that you stick on the side of a building to something that is, has much more value. And so they're doing all this structural stone using computers to kind of get there. And it's really interesting. So I was supposed to go to Russia, and I wasn't able to because of the war in Ukraine. And instead, I had a little train trip, which is a story for another day. But the point of it was to go to the Aga Khan headquarters in Switzerland, as well as to meet the architects in Spain and Ireland. I got to meet with Farouk Darkhshani, who's the director of the Aga Khan Award. And one thing, I asked him, do the architects have anything in common? And he said, no. So thanks for coming. No, he said also, he has noticed that critique is really important. So I've had some experiences as an architect where you feel like you're being torn apart and just feels awful, but in the end it makes the project better. And he's seen that. He's been at this for 30 years, and when an architect moves from one environment where they have critique to another environment where they don't, their architecture suffers. And you can that's something that you can take with you. I was headed back to Bangladesh. I had a stop in Oman. This is a shortlisted Snøhetta project at a fish market. It's really, really fantastic. And I had a stop in Pakistan. So in Pakistan, I had a chance to go up north into the mountains. And we have a exchange here with the BAC with Gilgit-Baltistan University. Yes, that one. And Eleni was generous enough to connect me with folks there, and they showed me around. And it was here that I sort of had a realization about generosity, which is everybody along the way was so generous to me. And it's almost as if generous architects make good architects, you know. This is Kashmiri chai, which is a fantastic cup of tea that I had never heard about in my life. And you know, you're sitting there drinking this tea that you've never heard of, and you're like, why haven't I ever heard of this? You know, and it's that sort of thing that kind of sticks with you when somebody goes out of their way to give you a cup of tea, you know. And on the right, you're seeing some of the historic preservation done by the Aga Khan Network, not the award, but he has so many different, he has a healthcare unit, he has a development network that is very extensive and fantastic, and I hope to go back someday. The project in Banyuwangi in Indonesia by Andra Maten won the 2022 cycle award. So we've pretty much finished the 2019 cycle, and I'm still on the road, and the 2022 cycle comes out, and I happen to be nearby and able to go see the airport. The interesting thing about this is it's right in the middle of rice fields. It's an international airport. What they did was they zoned it. They said, okay, we know that this place is gonna, you know, when we bring in this airport, people are gonna want to build. No building. And it also is, it's open air. So you hear the jets come in, and it absolutely works. Now we're to Bangladesh, and let's see how we're doing. Okay, Bangladesh. This is the project I went to see. It is the Arcadia Education Project by Saiful Haq. And it's gone. This is not my picture. This is my picture. The monsoons came and they took it away. So he's hoping to rebuild it. But this is what I found. You know, it was it came all this way. But it was good because it let me see several other projects in Bangladesh that I'm going to share here. The first is the Mehdi Handmade School up north. This is the context of it, and this is the project that connected me with the Aga Khan Award as an interest. I had a opportunity to help build a school in Cameroon, and then when I came to the BAC, the first project that Karen showed me was the handmade Mehdi school in this room, actually. So I had been following the Aga Khan Award since then, because this really spoke to the kinds of things I was interested in. You can see they have this, you know, fantastic caves, you know, kids go in there and learn, you know. And it's a lightweight bamboo structure with a, you know, the space, the experience in there is really wonderful. So I went to see Saiful Haq's Arcadia School, and he connected me with a few other people. He said, why don't you go down to Janida and see Kabir Sir? And at the time, they were shortlisted for the Aga Khan, and they've since won it. So I got to see another Aga Khan Award project without even knowing it. This is a Riverside project. It's his hometown, and he has a very interesting approach. This is Janida, and he doesn't do any work without being asked to, which is sort of a slow way of working. But it's almost like, you know, the first step is, okay, I'm going to eat with you and have a meal, and we'll get to know each other. And then eventually you'll learn that I'm an architect, and then you'll learn what an architect does, and then you'll learn how I can help you. So he's helping these people You can see on the wall there, there's a model, and then this is what it turned into as this public space walkway. The city is very dense, and it's growing enormously, 250,000 people, and he's the only architect there. You know, 250,000 people, more than one architect could be used. But they all are architects now. He's essentially empowered them to community design. This is not a space that, you know, he would claim as something that he did. This is something that community sort of drew and through different workshops and whatnot. The last project I'd like to share is the Rohingya camps. Excuse me. The Rohingya refugees, overnight, almost 1 million people crossed the river into Bangladesh. They were fleeing a pretty terrible terror situation. And Bangladesh has accommodated them with camps, which they are living in for now. You know, these 1 million people are fed every day by the World Food Program. That's a lot of food every day for the last however many years. The camps are surrounded by these barbed wires, which make for good laundry lines, but they're very dense, you know, and the architecture is all on top of each other. You know, when they arrived, they were, you know, frantically building toilets. The Rohingya are very conservative people, so, you know, there was a line of women waiting for the cement to dry on the toilets, and they don't speak the same language. So, you know, how can you help someone who you can't speak with? Very young. Everybody, the age of the camp is very young. And this is your typical construction, tarps. They're, you know, actually not allowed to build permanent structures, which they don't want to stay. They want to go home. So, you know, temporary makes sense. And this project here, in you see the 2-story, is one of a serial number of projects throughout the camps by Rizvi Hassan, Saad Ben Mustafa, and Kaja Fatmi. And you can see these centers are really done with love and care. And, you know, inside of the centers, they're doing crafts and really beautiful things in a context that's very difficult. A lot of their work is empowering the community. The Rohingya, because they're isolated in the camps, their economies are some almost hopeless. You know, it's like, how do I grow when you're in the camp? This is the Hindu camp, which is a minority within the minority. You know, the Rohingya are mostly Muslim, but then there's a Hindu minority as well, and all of them are traumatized. You know, they've been displaced at least once, and these spaces are really important to them, and what happens inside of them is really important as well. And the beauty of the structures, you know, it's not much. It's just concrete and some posts, and but it's covered in artwork. You know, it's like everything matters. So these projects in the camps were celebrated by the Aga Khan Award. One project that wasn't is the Rohingya Cultural Memory Center, and it's only because it wasn't new enough. There's certain rules for how long a project has been in use before they can really evaluate it. So this is Rizvi Hassan, and it's the Rohingya Cultural Memory Center, and it's one of the most powerful pieces of architecture I've come across. Inside of it, you see models of the Rohingyas' homes, which they made from memory to show their kids. And you wonder, is architecture important? And then you see, this is front and center. What they're showing is their home, and it's really unbelievable, to see the effort they put into these projects. And one of the things you might think is, okay, I'm an architect. I am going to do architect things. Rizvi this isn't maybe part of the program. Like all of a sudden he's doing something that's useful, and that's one of the things that he said over and over again while I was with him. Architects can be useless or they can be useful, and I would argue that this is a very useful. The Rohingya were rice farmers, and they can't anymore. They're in the camps. So here's a tapestry they made showing the rice farming process. They have the music there. I love this. On the left, you see the way they're living. On the right, you see the way they used to live. And here's a tapestry of how they hope to live. And, this is urban planning at its finest. The interesting thing about this project is it was never a building project. It was from the social mental health care unit. So it was always about giving the Rohingya a sense of dignity and a sense of pride. The roof is made traditionally from the grasses there from their homeland, and Rizvi, the architect, he said, "Oh, I know how to build roofs," and he did it all wrong. And the Rohingya said, "You did it all wrong," and he had to swallow the wasted grasses that he tried so hard to get from sources that and do it again, and do it the way that they traditionally build it. And in the end, the beauty of this space is incredible. These are the Rohingya men who helped build it. They're so proud of it. There's the master builder on the left and his work on the right. It's a very, very powerful space. And these are the people it's serving. It's the Rohingya camps are God knows what will happen next there. But that in the end, I ended up in Bangladesh for a couple months working with Rizvi, and we founded a nonprofit, Detour Habitats, together, along with Kaja Fatmi and Hosan Al-Akagiri, who is a BAC alum. And there will be more stories to share. Working on a book, working on some more for the website and whatnot. And how did I do, Karen? Do we have time for questions?
Step up to the microphone.
To answer your question, Andrew, there's always time for questions.
Excellent.
Never forget that.
I got a question for you. So
you're clearly a BAC alum, and I'm pretty sure you took in City X before, so I
Yes,
think
sir.
you're very familiar with Karen and Richard's way of running the class. I don't know if you know or not, we're currently in the section right now where we're preparing for our final assignment, which is being the manifestos. Now, it's clearly obvious and evident that you care about your work and what you do, especially going off of the 3 terms of generosity and the other 2 as well. So I'm asking you, why? Why architecture? I mean, why? I mean, it's obvious you care, but why architecture? Why did you pick that as a career? Why did you go on the pathways that you decided to go on to, which created the great work that you did? Why? Why did you decide one day? I got you. I set it up to give you everything I want to know. Why did you decide one day, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Now I'm done.
You know, I didn't choose architecture. I was a computer programmer. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I had an opportunity at an architecture firm. And one day, my boss said, "You need a license." I said, "Okay, I gotta go back to school." And it was here that I fell in love with architecture. You know, I was doing it in the office. But it wasn't until, you know, we were kind of loose and free with playing around with, there's no budgets, there's no client, and kind of had the chance to explore in a sort of creative way, that I fell in love with it. And that one thing led to another. You know, I wouldn't say I ever had like a light dawns moment. It was more just going through the open doors.
Which one of these projects were oh, hello.
Hello.
I just want to know which one of these projects made the most impact in your life, because I see that most of them are like helping to people that are in need. So which one was the most impact for you?
I've been asked this quite a bit, actually. For me, it's more about the people, you know, the relationships along the way. So it's as if, you know, every person I met along the way is important to me. You know, they were all cared for me, and in a country where I couldn't speak the language, didn't know how to get food, you know, it's like these people mean a lot to me. And I couldn't say one more than the other, you know. Many of them saved my life in ways, you know. So I do, you know, the work in Bangladesh is where I spent maybe 3 months there, so I had more time there. And then you know, Palestine was with Auntie Intisar, and that was, you know, she was really special. She would, you know, I would talk about architecture with her, and she would, you know, I'd say, well, should I do this or that? And she would say things like, if you have a chance to plant a tree, plant it. You know, so it's really about the people more than the projects.
Do you plan to visit Latin America or just Asian country?
Yes, I had an exchange in Colombia with landscape here, and I have many friends there, and I hope to expand there.
Hi,
Hi.
Mac, nice to meet you. I really liked what you were saying about good architects or generous architects, but wanted to see like what specifically in the practice you think applies to that thought or
Sure.
theory.
So it's a tricky one to present academically, right? But in the office, you know, yelling at somebody can be generous. It doesn't feel good, but they might not hear it any other way. And so, you know, I see my boss, you know, really getting into it. And you might think, oh, he's such a jerk, but no, there's a generosity that it takes to address somebody. Conversely, maybe you're giving a presentation on some standards that is boring as heck and you're giving it 20 times, but you're giving it with the same care that you would the first time. You know, that's a form of generosity that it's not so much like, oh, you know, I'm gonna blow through my budget and just spend gobs of time on stuff. No, you can't do that. That's detrimental to the project, actually. So that's does that answer your question?
Hi, Shaban. It's always inspiring to hear you, Andrew. I want to know, from everything that you learned in your trip, how are you applying it in your day-to-day job that you're doing today? Because it's a lot more commercialized, it's a lot more budget constraints. Every project is not going to be an Aga Khan Award, but what are you bringing to your day-to-day job that we all can apply ourselves as well?
Sure. The usefulness one is the clearest part. I read the energy code. It doesn't take much. I mean, it's dry as heck, but you know, you read it and then you're useful. So I am working on all these different projects in the office just because I know the energy code, you know, that's also I'm trying to do the generous thing. I don't quite know how that works yet. I think there might be people in the room or online who can tell better whether I'm doing it or not. But also I think the Aga Khan's, you know, quote there about listening. I put, you know, I made my site listening architects and everything, but it's because I'm a bad listener, you know. So it reminds me always to be, you know, I actually need to listen to what you're saying. The project will be better. And I think that all of these architects did that. You know, they listened to their clients, they listened to people, contractors, you name it.
Hello. I'd like to know what were the difficulties on working or facing the union civil workers in these different areas, or how did it impact it on the Gantt diagram on the developing of these different projects?
Can you ask that again?
So as architects, we definitely work with people that labor that they do the work, and we probably guide them through the plans, right? But some places are just difficult to handle. It happens every part of it.
Yeah.
So what were these difficulties that you probably saw? How risky were they, and how did you manage to develop the final build?
Sure. So I had a contractor say to me once, who is also a good friend, you know, architects, a lot of times we think, okay, I'll meet you halfway, and that's you know, I'm already going above and beyond to meet you halfway. You got to go all the way. You know, these some of the folks we work with are not going to meet you halfway, and if you want to make that connection, you have to go all the way. That's the nutshell. It doesn't always feel good, and sometimes you can't, but that's seems to work.
Great presentation, Andrew. I know you're still looking at all these projects as a whole and trying to understand unifying themes between them, and maybe also divide them into different meaningful categories. I'm very curious about the projects where the architects are coming from places like Ireland or Spain, non-Muslim majority countries, and designing very successful architecture for the Islamic world. how do those architects navigate that process of designing for different culture? And if I understood correctly, I think the willingness to be critiqued plays a role in that. I just want to hear more about how that happened in those processes. Thank you.
So the two, the Irish Henning Peng and IDOM. The Palestinian Museum was done by the Irish architects, and the Senegalese project was done by the Spanish. They handled it different ways. IDOM, they had a photographer go through, take gobs of pictures, and then they sort of drew inspiration from those photos. The Henning Peng went and visited. Her work is, their work is fascinating, and she really goes all in on all her projects. So she said, I flew out there, and this was a proposal. It was a competition, so she really went all in on the competition. But she said one thing, I don't remember if I mentioned this already, but as they were working on the Palestinian Museum, everybody in the office at some point realized that it was a really important project. This wasn't, architecture as normal this is really important. And again, I think that that's something that makes good architecture.
What a very generous talk, and what a very, very good use of award scholarship funding to bring it all back. I really feel like I've got it. Not me, of course, but there's architects of my time who would have gone on the trip you went on, and it would have been reversed. You would have spent a lot more images looking at Jean Nouvel, and a lot more images looking at all of these famous buildings that you just mentioned, almost like commercials in this talk. I would just love to hear you, and I know why you went. It's clear from the talk, but I'm wondering what you came to think of these Starchitect projects. What do you take away from those?
Rich, I remember walking into your office, and I had a quote from Alvaro Siza about beauty. I think, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was something like, what is this fluff? And that train trip through Europe, I sometimes slept in fields, sometimes on sea cliffs, sometimes on the train. I slept under an Alvaro Siza, and I thought of you while I was there. But it was, I never really planned to run into these things. I just stumble across, canonical architecture. They're like, oh, that's OMA, that's Snøhetta, and it's really different in person, and I haven't really processed it all, honestly. I mean, it's interesting to see it in pictures now and have an experience to connect with it. One thing I did, which I didn't bring into this presentation, which is good because the audio wasn't working. I recorded the sounds of some of these spaces. So I have, what does Gaudi sound like? What does Big sound like? What does OMA? So I have a phone full of recordings. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but it that's part of the experience, is the sound of a place. It was fun to see.
I'm going to piggyback on Rich's question, because thank you for bringing that up. And again, fabulous presentation. Thanks, Andrew. And it's a bit of a leading question for you. John Nouvel did win an Aga Khan Award for his building in Italy, the Arab World Institute, something like that, World du Monde Arabe in Paris, right? So we know that the Aga Khan Award is different from the Pritzker. You guys all know what the Pritzker is, right? So you mentioned that it's not just the Western world, it's the Islamic world. It's actually not just Islamic world, it's got to be for people of Muslim faith all over the world. So why did you decide to trace and follow the winners of the Aga Khan Award as opposed to anything else? Is there criteria to that award that perhaps interests you, et cetera, et cetera? If you could explain that a bit more, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I was interested in the faith aspect of, the award goes out of its way to separate itself from the Aga Khan as a religious entity. And it's viewed quite secularly. The Aga Khan doesn't view it that way. And I don't view my own, I'm a Christian and I don't view my work as separate from my faith. So but I have trouble talking about my faith. And I was attracted to it because it was a way to look at that, faith and architecture without it being personal. I can talk about the Islamic faith without without having a personal worry or so obviously I'm having trouble talking right now, so it's a journey. But yes, thank you for that. That's definitely that was one of the things that really drew me to it. Was this is a award that was founded by the leader of a faith, and it absolutely trickles down into it in terms of the values that the award espouses, and I think it's something that he's really quite proud of. But